Welcome to Visualize, the podcast where collaboration fuels change. I'm your host, Chris Baker, and each week we'll explore incredible connections between nonprofits, businesses, and the community. This is a space where we highlight inspiring partnerships, uncover strategies for creating meaningful impact, and share stories that show how working together can make all the difference. Whether you're a nonprofit leader, a business owner, or someone just passionate about building connections, this podcast is for you. Welcome back to Visualize. Today I have Cameron Warrick from the Boys and Girls Club of Broward County. Welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
No, I really appreciate you coming in. I've known about the Boys and Girls Club for a long time, so I'm hoping that people get a lot of great tips and advice from this organization watching this episode. So a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Again, awesome to be here. Appreciate you having me. A little bit about myself. Obviously, I'm from Boys and Girls Club. I work as the Director of Development and Corporate Relations, and that's just a long way of saying I do business development, right?
Yes.
Fundraising. Wear a little bit of every hat, but I really kind of found my niche within this organization where I've been now about 7 years working in youth development. Through college, I was an athlete, and so I kind of had to use that energy once I didn't find myself in the NBA, and so I started to redirect it towards, the youth and coaching and stuff like that. So I jumped around a few sales and marketing type of positions, and my degree was actually in recreation and sports management. So when I found Boys and Girls Club, it all just kind of fit together, right? The things I was good at, my niches, and so when I first started out, I was actually on more of the programmatic side of Boys and Girls Club, just kind of in the clubs themselves, doing the groundwork, working directly with the youth, again, coaching, mentoring, and all the like. And to a point where I was actually a club director for a couple years and actually managing a full facility. We have one of 16 that I was in charge of in Broward County. So from there, I just kind of worked the ranks and found an opportunity to get into the administrative role, and that's kind of where I am today. And it's been very, very rewarding because coming from the programmatic side, I get to look kind of from a different vantage point in an administrative role. I kind of get to see both sides.
It's a different viewpoint.
Definitely.
Yeah, because you're working with the kids directly. And now you're actually like behind the scenes of like, how does this all happen?
Exactly.
How do we put this together to make it all happen?
Yeah.
I
mean, and it's funny because there's always this kind of, and not just in nonprofit world, but all kind of, corporate and businesses, you feel like there's a divide between that kind of administrative role, those behind the scenes people and the people who are on the front line. But, it's all very, very necessary to make it work as one unit, and I've grown to just really appreciate both sides, and not forget the value of, where I started, and so now where I am in my administrative role, it just kind of heightens what I enjoyed, working on that programmatic side, the actual interaction with kids was great. And I do miss that a lot. But now I know I'm doing that to a bigger scale. I'm trying to provide that same interaction, that same joy on a bigger scale for not just one club, but all 16 of our clubs now,
So when you say like one club, how many kids are we talking about in that one club that you probably were working with at that time? Because now you say that you're working for 16, so now it's 16 times as many obviously that you're assisting by being in the admin role. But in the club specifically, how many I don't know, good range, how many kids do you?
So we would see on average just about 200 kids a day.
Wow.
Just one location. We service well over 2,000 kids a week between all of our clubs, right? And we've been in service now 60 years. So we've been doing this for a good long time, specifically here in Broward. Obviously, Boys and Girls Club is a national entity as well, but we're a bit independent, county by county, city by city. So in Broward alone, we've been servicing for 60 years. One club alone can service up to 200 kids daily, and that's just an average, right?
Yeah.
That can fluctuate in terms of how many kids are actually enrolled in your program, where even at one location, you can have north of 500 members who are enrolled in your program. All age ranges from 6 up to 18. So you're dealing with adolescents and teens, young adults. So it's a wide variety of age groups. It's a wide variety of personalities and
Emotions.
temperaments and emotions.
Yes.
So now in the administrative role, it's, I get to still do the things I was doing, but now again, I get to provide on a larger basis, a larger scale. I always found myself to be very resourceful. And so in a development role, that's essentially what I'm doing. R&D, resource and development. So now some of the things I was just really hyper focused on my one club, I get to now do for all of our clubs and try to get the same impact. And so, again, it's very rewarding. It gets me out of bed, keeps me coming into the office, keeps me motivated on those days, especially where I do get a little, oh man, I would love to kind of be back in the club, play around and, just kick back, hang out with my kids every once in a while, and do the more leisurely stuff. But, the mission's a bit greater than that now for me.
I think that's what we take on a lot of the time as we see the bigger picture and we see the bigger mission. And when you can step into a role like you have, you're really taking it to the next level.
Yeah.
Because you've actually worked, in the club directly with the kids and you've kind of helped assist with that. And you can see it from a different vantage point. And I think that's the most valuable piece that you probably got to take out by being a part of the club initially.
Yeah.
And then now pushing forward and saying, okay, this is probably where we need to go and how we need to do it. How often do you get to go back to the clubs directly and work with the kids?
I go pretty often. In my role, I get to because I'm still very involved. I'm bringing other organizations in, other businesses and other individuals in on the mission and introducing them to our cause and trying to gain their support, right? And the easiest way to do that is to let them experience the experience for themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And it kind of goes into what I'm saying about having that set of eyes, right? Coming from that sales and marketing background, your product knowledge is what really helps you make the sale, if you will. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not even really selling. You're just reminding people why it's worthwhile buying. And for our, nonprofit space, it's you're supporting, you want to support, you just need that extra push, that reminder. So, I get to visit my clubs at least 2 or 3 times a week, just off the basis of checking in and seeing what kind of needs I can help service, what I can bring up in my next conversation, when I'm talking to a potential supporter, and we find a lot of opportunities to bring people in for engagement, volunteering. It's not always a big, hand over fist transaction or a monetary donation. It's a lot of involvement. There's those 5 T's of support that, we talk about in nonprofit spaces, right? Time, talent, treasures, ties, testimony, right? So I'm looking for all of that, and I'm looking to bring it in our spaces specifically because that's, I think, where it touches people the most, right? I can have a conversation with you over the phone, but bringing you into the space, I really don't have to say too much. It kind of just sells itself.
They just see it and they understand and they can experience it
exactly
firsthand. It's kind of nice that you brought that up because it's not always about the monetary value. It is about other ways that you can give back. And time and volunteering is such a huge one that a lot of people out there don't even actually see or recognize until they get placed into like, hey, do you have an extra hour a week? Do you have an extra couple hours a week? Here are some options that could be extremely valuable for us that may not even affect your, day to day, but it makes a huge impact for those kids.
Yeah, for sure. And it may not always draw a direct line to monetary, value, but it does offset cost even at times, right? If you're giving an hour of your time, that's an hour of manpower that, we don't have to cover a cost for. If you're giving some talent, which is service, right? That's a service we don't have to come out of pocket for. Ties and testimony, your network working for our network, right? Your testimony, you advocating for us, it all does find its way back in a sense to the monetary value that we are looking for. That keeps the lights on, if you will.
It does. And I can't remember the exact number, but I think it's like $33 is what the cost is for a volunteer. that's
Yeah,
actually saving the organization that much money.
exactly.
Every hour you're volunteering,
Yeah,
it's somewhere around the $30, maybe 40. And that adds up.
right,
Like, if I were to volunteer 4 hours of my time, all right, we're over $100 at
right.
that point, and now you have 100 people doing that. Wow, that's a huge impact that really makes a difference in this kid's lives and the community.
Yeah, and now corporations are getting more and more involved in it. Corporate social responsibility is a big trend now, and they're
Hmm.
hiring people specifically for these roles. And within that, they have volunteer match programs now. Where they
Yeah.
used to have company match programs, it's literally volunteer match where they will donate a certain amount of money per volunteer hour one of their employees has spent at your organization. So the value of it is becoming more and more recognized, and that's important. It's really important because again, you can go door to door even and ask for a penny here and a nickel there, but again, sometimes you do just kind of need everybody to pull up their boots and just get to work, right?
It's
Hey,
true.
we got to paint this wall. We just need some hands, all hands on deck. We got to regarden or something like that. It's even if I have the money to cover the supplies and costs, who's going to do it all, right? So
It's very true.
yeah, so it's definitely good to see that happening in the world right now where people are that socially conscious, you know what I mean? Individually, we see it all the time, but now that companies are really pushing it as an agenda, I think it's going to be a big thing moving forward, kind of in our sector of industry.
I want to say the culture has really changed in the corporate, and I think a lot of the leadership is now starting to see it, like you're
Yep.
saying,
Yeah.
that giving back to the community and making sure that, we have a safer community, have a more responsible community, and bringing that into the work culture and giving them that space to go, this is what I want to volunteer for. We're going to match it. We're going to understand your reasoning behind it, and letting the actual employees dictate where some of this money is kind of
Right.
going. They're going to have a stronger appeal to working at the company longer,
Exactly.
as well as they're seeing the value of like, oh my gosh, you're supporting the cause that I want to support
Mhm.
by giving me the time off. And maybe it's just, that PTO space to go and volunteer, the volunteer hours. Or like you said, there's a match component. There's so many different ways that a company can join in to really give back to the community. And I
Yeah.
think that's fantastic.
And they're definitely expanding on that as well, where they are appealing more towards their employees' causes, right?
Yes.
And also expanding their own. It was a time where it would even feel like a company could only support one cause at a time.
Right.
And it's not the case anymore. They have different core values within these corporate social responsibility structures, right? Where they may support 4 or 5 different causes. And so now it opens up, the space for all nonprofits to really kind of come together a bit, and collaborate a bit more, because you say, we're not really fighting for dollars the way it seemed like it once was. We're really all kind of, assuming that there's money for all of us here. There's
Yes.
contribution available for all of us. It's just a matter of making sure we are really aligning with our values, right? And that it matches with the organization that you're stewarding and you're prospecting. And then, like I say, from there, it really just becomes a conversation. It just becomes a relationship building thing. They're not going to exclude you because you don't fall under this criteria. They really are going to be very open as long as you're within that realm. And so, you see it all the time. You see some organizations, they are, sponsoring, contributing to not just one, but 10, 11, 12 different organizations that,
Right.
are all nonprofit, but all just a little bit different, service a different need, service a different cause. It's almost like they're taking a stock market approach, right? Where they're just, diversifying those portfolios a bit, right? By saying, hey, listen, we can't just do everything in human services. We need to do some sustainability too. We need to do some
Right.
youth development. We need to make sure we are being, whole in our give back. So that's very good looking forward for sure.
One of the best words that you used was collaborate. And that's literally what we are trying to talk about on our show completely. So I'm glad that you brought it up. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about that. So what are some of the organizations that either you've brought through the space and they got
Yeah.
to see it and they're like, this is what we want to do. How can we help? And any of those kind of stories that really stand out in your mind.
Man, I mean, we've had so many different opportunities to collaborate with like organizations, other nonprofits that maybe aren't exactly like us, but offer a service that maybe we don't.
Yeah.
Because like I said, we service, you know, members who are 6 all the way to 18, and so there's just about space for everything when you have that wide a demographic. So we've partnered with organizations like Feeding South Florida, for instance, right? Within Boys and Girls Club, we operate under 4 key pillars: academic success, healthy lifestyles, good character and citizenship, and workforce readiness. So under our good character and citizenship pillar, we have our what we call club within the club, our Keystone Club.
Yeah.
And so this is where our kind of team members, we kind of empower them to do some citizenship work, get out into the community, be involved. We have them do a few projects where they kind of take it upon themselves to do their own form of give back, right, within our organization. So we recently actually partnered with Feeding South Florida for one of those.
Okay.
And so we packed, I want to say, over 500, feeding bags, for, the community here down in South Florida. And it was just so rewarding, right? Because our teens got to really do exactly what we kind of do in our roles in that administrative space. You know what I mean? Get out and be involved, get out and give back, even though they're not quite at that position where it's required of them, by their job title or because they make a certain amount of money. It's just an opportunity for them to understand the value of it, right? And so for that, obviously, we don't provide that service. Feeding South Florida does. So it was a great opportunity for them to come in and introduce it to our kids, right? And we entertain things like that a lot. Even now, currently, we've partnered with Volta, which is a violin group, and they're also a nonprofit. And so they have been coming in to teach programming with our kids to learn violin. And so how they start is they have like a cardboard box that they make and put strings on it to just start getting the feel of a violin. And so now they've graduated to the point where they're actually playing real violins and playing small concerts around in Broward. And so it was really great because our kids they are in communities in high need. So otherwise, they might not have the access to something like the violin, right? They might not have, the resources to, go learn violin at a prestigious institute or something like that.
Right, exactly.
So this is a perfect opportunity to have someone come in and really introduce it to them, right? A similar organization, more on our health and lifestyles portion is First Tee of Broward, which is a golf organization.
I do know of them, yes.
So I've been getting big into golf myself. So I was like, well, I don't know, maybe I need these lessons more to my kids. Yeah. But, it was funny because when we've been working with them for a couple of years now, some programming, they've been coming to our clubs and, doing some exercise with our kids. And at very first, we kind of presented it to our kids. Hey, we got some people that want to come, show you guys how to play golf.
Yeah.
It was a bit taken back. They're like, oh, golf, I don't know about that, right? Because you're just telling it to them. But when the coaches came in and they put a golf, club in their hand and went through when are the golf guys coming back? Is First Tee coming back? We loved it. And now they're asking for it more and more because just like I said about Volta, it's a thing of access, right? And a thing of resource. These are things that sometimes you find in more affluent communities, right?
Yeah.
Country clubs and, orchestras and stuff like that. They're not necessarily found in the communities we service the most. And that's one of the things that we're trying to grow into at Boys and Girls Club Broward. It is an access point, right? And that's why we're so open to collaborating with other organizations, other nonprofits, because we understand that, hey, we don't have everything, that our members and their families need. Of course, we can provide, up to a certain amount of things and amenities and resources, but we still know we're going to need reliance on someone else to kind of come in and fill in some of those gaps. And so, those are three that, right off the bat, I know have just been really, really, demonstrative of how we need to kind of bank on one another at times, and really just, service each other while still servicing the same community.
Well, you're servicing the same community, exactly. And you're going to touch them in different key points, whatever those organizations that you're working with are going to help. So having those relationships, building those, access points so that the community can grow.
Right.
And one of the biggest things, like art, people that actually get introduced to art and the violin, I think that's a fantastic way to push them in a whole different direction that they probably would have never gotten to in their current situation, because they probably would have went a whole different path. But by now giving them this access to playing the violin and having this whole different, route in life, it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Visualize. We hope that the inspiration and practical insights can help you foster stronger connections and meaningful change. Don't forget to subscribe, share the episode, and leave us a review. To learn more about Visuals by Momo and how we support collaboration and storytelling, visit visualsbymomo.com. A huge thank you to everyone out there listening. Until next time, remember, collaboration fuels change, and your connections can inspire the world.